The rain was coming down hard when Emily felt Ryan's hand shove her back. She stumbled on the doorstep, her 8-month belly nearly throwing her completely off balance. Behind him, Julia crossed her arms with a cold smile on her lips. Emily looked at her husband, incredulous, hoping this was all a nightmare. But it was real, all too real. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us what city you're watching from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The day had started strangely. Emily woke up and noticed Ryan barely looked at her during breakfast. He was scrolling through his phone with a tight expression, as if he were calculating something important. She tried to make conversation, mentioning the prenatal appointment scheduled for that week, but he just mumbled something and left for work without even a goodbye kiss. Emily was used to the relationship's ups and downs, especially after Julia came into their lives. Ryan's co-worker had become a constant presence in their home, always with some excuse about urgent projects or meetings that needed to be finished. At first, Emily thought it was just pregnancy paranoia, that silly jealousy everyone says is normal. But as the months went by, it became increasingly obvious that there was something more going on. That afternoon, Emily was arranging the baby's room when she heard the front door open. It was only 4 o'clock, too early for Ryan to be back from the office. She walked down the stairs slowly, holding her belly, and found not only her husband but also Julia walking into the living room like she owned the place. "Hey, honey. I didn't know you'd be home early today," Emily said, trying to sound casual. Ryan didn't even look at her. Julia, on the other hand, gave a little smirk that made Emily's stomach turn. There was something different in the air, a tension she couldn't quite place. "Emily, we need to talk," Ryan said, finally facing his wife. The coldness in his eyes was terrifying. This wasn't the man who had proposed to her 2 years ago, nor the one who cried with joy when he found out she was pregnant. This was someone else. "Talk about what?" she asked, her heart starting to race. "About the situation here at home," he replied, crossing his arms. "Things have changed, Emily. You need to understand that." Julia settled onto the sofa as if she were watching a TV show. Emily looked from one to the other, confused and scared at the same time. "Ryan, I don't understand any of this. What situation? What's happening?" "What's happening is that you're not part of his plans anymore," Julia said with an infuriating calm. "Sorry to be so blunt, but someone had to say it." Emily felt her legs go weak. She leaned against the wall, trying to process those words. "Ryan, is she serious? You're going to leave me? Now? 8 months pregnant with your child." "It's not about leaving or not leaving," he answered, avoiding her gaze. "It's about moving on. Julia and we connected in a way I never imagined. And you, well, you're only here because you got pregnant." The pain Emily felt was physical, like a knife had been plunged into her chest. Tears began to stream down her face, but she tried to hold them back. "You can't be serious. We built a life together. We have a baby on the way. And he'll have a father, don't worry, but I can't pretend to be happy in this marriage anymore. Julia makes me truly happy." Emily looked at Julia, who returned her gaze with a look of superiority. It was too surreal to be true. "So, what do you want? For me to leave the house? Is that it?" "It would be best for everyone," Julia said, standing up. "You can go to your parents' house, I don't know, but staying here getting in the way, that's not an option anymore." "Getting in the way?" Emily repeated, disbelieving. "I live here. This is my home too." "Actually, it's not," Ryan said, picking up some papers from the table. "The house is in my name, and I want you to leave today." Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. She looked out the window and saw the sky had suddenly darkened, heavy clouds covering the afternoon sun. Thunder began to rumble in the distance. "Ryan, at least wait until morning. It's starting to rain, for God's sake." "There's nothing to wait for, Emily. Get your things and go." The rain started slowly, a few drops hitting the window, but within minutes it turned into a downpour. Emily ran upstairs to the bedroom, grabbed a small suitcase and threw some clothes inside, her hands shaking so much she could barely close the zipper. When she came down, Ryan was already holding the door open, the rain blowing in and soaking the living room floor. "Ryan, I'm begging you, Just let me call my dad to come get me. Don't put me out on the street like this." "You can call from anywhere. Now get out, Emily." And then it happened. Ryan put his hand on her back and pushed. Emily stumbled over the threshold, nearly falling flat on the wet ground. Her belly was heavy, her balance completely compromised. She managed to grab the porch railing, but she was already soaked. The rain was falling so hard, she could barely see the street. "You're going to regret this," she screamed, her voice mixing with the sound of the storm. The door slammed in her face. Emily stood there in the rain with nowhere to go. Neighbors opened their windows, curious about the scene, but no one moved to help. She started walking down the sidewalk, the heavy suitcase in one hand and the other protecting her belly. Every step was painful, every breath an effort. That's when she saw the headlights. A black car pulled up right in front of her, and a tall figure in a perfectly tailored suit, even in the rain, got out of the driver's seat. It took Emily a few seconds to recognize him. It was Anthony, her father. Anthony Miller wasn't one to show up unannounced. In fact, he barely showed up at all. After his wife died 15 years ago, he threw himself into his work and practically disappeared from Emily's life. She grew up being raised by her grandparents, seeing her father only on special occasions, always with that distant air of someone who had more important things to do. But there he was, in the middle of the storm, with an expression Emily had never seen before. Pure rage. "Dad? What are you doing here?" Emily asked, still processing the situation. "Get in the car, Emily, now," he ordered, opening the back door. She obeyed without question, relieved to have shelter. Anthony turned on the heat and grabbed a blanket from the front seat, wrapping his daughter in it carefully. "How did you know I was here?" "I've always known everything, Emily. Always." "What do you mean?" Anthony looked in the rearview mirror, directly at the house Emily had just been thrown out of. Ryan and Julia were at the window watching the scene. "I've been following your life from a distance. I know it sounds strange, but I never stopped caring. I just didn't know how to get close again after your mother was gone." Emily wiped her tears, still shivering from the cold and shock. "Ryan kicked me out, Dad. Him and that woman. They put me on the street, pregnant in the pouring rain." "I saw everything," Anthony said, his voice laced with a dangerous calm. "And they're going to pay for it. Every second of this humiliation will be accounted for." "What are you talking about?" Anthony started the car and began to drive. "Emily, do you know where Ryan works?" "At Miller Construction. It's a big engineering firm." "That's right. And do you know who owns Miller Construction?" Emily fell silent, her brain slow to connect the dots. "No, it can't be." "Oh, it can. I founded that company 30 years ago, and Ryan, that wonderful husband of yours, has been working there for 3 years. Julia, too. In fact, she was recently promoted to the Human Resources Department. Interesting coincidence, don't you think?" "Dad, I had no idea. Ryan never mentioned the owner's last name." "He didn't mention it because I've kept my name out of the spotlight for a long time. I prefer to operate behind the scenes, but that doesn't mean I don't know exactly what goes on inside my company." Emily began to understand the scale of it all. Ryan and Julia thought they were untouchable, that they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. But they had just humiliated the daughter of the man who signed their paychecks every month. "What are you going to do?" she asked, afraid of the answer. "Nothing illegal, don't worry. But there are a few things they need to know, and there's a process that needs to be followed." Anthony drove to an apartment in the city center, a spacious, well-decorated place Emily had never seen before. "This is my apartment. You'll stay here for as long as you need. Tomorrow we'll sort out the details of your situation, but right now you need to rest, take a hot shower, and eat something." Emily walked into the apartment, still dizzy from everything that had happened in the last few hours. Anthony made some tea and brought her some toast. "Emily, I know I've been an absent father, and I know nothing I do now can make up for all those years. But I promise you one thing. You and this child will never go through something like this again. I'm going to take care of you." She started crying again, but this time it wasn't just from sadness. It was from relief, from finally having someone on her side. "Thank you, Dad." Anthony smiled for the first time that night. "Now get some rest, because tomorrow the game really begins." Ryan woke up on Monday with a strange feeling, Over the weekend, he and Julia had celebrated Emily's departure as if it were a victory. He even texted a few friends, saying he was finally free to live the life he wanted. But that morning, when he opened his email, he found a summons that made his stomach churn. Mr. Ryan Davis, you are summoned to an extraordinary meeting with the Internal Audit Department and the Board of Directors of Miller Construction. Attendance is mandatory. Monday, 10 a.m., main conference room. Julia received the same email. They looked at each other, trying to figure out what was happening. It must be about that report we adjusted last month, Julia said, feigning confidence. Nothing major, just a routine review. But it wasn't routine. When they arrived at the conference room, they found not only the audit team, but also 3 members of the board of directors Ryan had never seen in person. And, sitting at the head of the table, was a man in a grey suit and glasses with a serious expression that made the entire room feel smaller. Good morning. My name is Anthony Miller. I am the founder and majority shareholder of this company. Ryan felt his legs go weak. Julia turned pale. You two have been summoned here because we received some serious allegations of improper conduct. Allegations that, after a preliminary investigation, have been substantiated. Allegations? What allegations? Ryan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. One of the auditors opened a folder and began to read. Falsifying timesheets, favoritism in promotion processes, misuse of company resources for personal purposes, and, more recently, unethical conduct related to the moral harassment of a pregnant employee's dependent. Ryan's blood ran cold. Emily, of course, she'd gone straight to her father. That's absurd. Emily doesn't work here. She's not an employee. But she was a beneficiary of the corporate health plan offered to employees' spouses, Anthony said, his voice calm but sharp. A plan you tried to cancel on Friday, without authorization and without a valid reason. Luckily, the system has security locks and the attempt was automatically blocked. Julia tried to defend herself. Mr. Miller, with all due respect, I think there's a misunderstanding here. I work in HR, I know all the protocols. There has been no irregularity on my part. Then explain this, Anthony said, signaling for a message to be projected on the screen. It was a screenshot of a conversation between Julia and Ryan, dated 3 weeks prior. Julia, we need to find a way to get her out of the picture. She ruins everything. Ryan, but how? We can't just kick her out. Julia, you don't have to kick her out, you just have to make her want to leave. Treat her poorly, ignore her, make it clear she's not welcome anymore. Eventually she'll get tired and leave on her own. Ryan, what if she doesn't? Julia, then we push a little harder. There are ways. The room fell silent. Ryan wanted to disappear. Julia was as white as a sheet of paper. This conversation was recovered from the company's internal messaging system, Anthony explained, a system you used improperly to plan a situation of moral harassment. But that was outside of work hours, Ryan protested. Using corporate tools which makes the conduct punishable under our code of ethics, one of the board members said. And there's more. The audit found other irregularities in your work records. Unworked overtime hours, altered reports to cover up tardiness, use of the corporate card for personal expenses. Julia tried one last gambit. This is a witch hunt. You're doing this because Emily is your daughter. You won't get away with this. Anthony smiled, but there was nothing joyful about it. It would be a witch hunt if I had fired you without proof. What I did was initiate a formal audit with proper protocol. The evidence is all here, documented, with witnesses and records. You have 3 business days to present a formal defense. In the meantime, you are suspended from your duties without pay until the disciplinary process is concluded. 3 days? But that's impossible, Ryan yelled. Then I suggest you use the time you have wisely. The meeting ended there. Ryan and Julia were escorted to the exit, forced to leave their badges and corporate devices at the reception. On the sidewalk, under the hot Monday sun, the reality of the trouble they were in finally hit them. I told you she would do something, Ryan said, running a hand through his hair, desperate. It wasn't her, you idiot. It was her father. That man has real power. We're screwed. And they were, because the next day, another bomb dropped. On Tuesday morning, Ryan got a call from his lawyer. Ryan, we need to talk urgently. The company has filed a lawsuit to recover improperly paid funds. They're alleging you received bonuses and overtime you didn't actually work. How much are they asking for? $80,000. Ryan almost dropped the phone. $80,000 was a year's salary for him. There was no way he could pay that. Julia, for her part, received an even worse notification. She was being investigated for document fraud. The report she had used to get her promotion in HR had been questioned by a colleague, and the audit discovered that several data points had been altered to favor her candidacy. This could lead to jail time, Julia, her lawyer said bluntly. Document fraud is a felony. If they prove it, you could get 1 to 5 years. The two met that night at Ryan's apartment, trying to find a way out, but every idea they came up with hit another wall. Anthony had built a perfect case, legal, documented and impossible to beat. We could try to settle, Julia suggested, offer to pay back the money and resign voluntarily. With what money, Julia? We're suspended, we're not getting paid. Then we'll get a loan. I don't know. Anything is better than a lawsuit. On Wednesday, they tried to schedule a meeting with the company's legal department. They were met by a young, professional lawyer who listened to their proposal patiently. Look, I'll be honest with you. The company is willing to negotiate, but not in the way you want. Mr. Miller has made it clear that he wants justice, not revenge. And justice, in this case, means you need to publicly admit what you did. Publicly? Ryan repeated, incredulous. Yes, an internal memo, apologizing for the unethical conduct and the damage caused. In addition, of course, to the repayment of the improper funds and accepting termination for cause. For cause? But that will ruin our careers forever. That's what happens when you commit fraud, the lawyer said without pity. You have until Friday to decide. After that, the lawsuit proceeds, and you will face criminal charges as well. Ryan left that meeting devastated. Everything he had built over the last few years was crumbling, and the worst part was, he knew it was his own fault. On Thursday, something no one expected happened. Emily was rushed to the hospital. The contractions started in the middle of the night, and Anthony sped her to the emergency room. The baby was coming early, and the doctors warned it was due to the extreme stress of the past few days. Ryan received a text from an unknown number. Your ex-wife is in premature labor. The doctors said it was caused by the stress from the situation over the weekend. I hope you're proud of yourself. The guilt hit him like a punch. Ryan tried to call Emily, but she didn't answer. He tried sending texts, but they were ignored. He went to the hospital, but security wouldn't let him in. Anthony had left express orders. Ryan was not permitted to visit. Please, I just want to know if she's okay, Ryan pleaded. She's in labor, sir, and you are not authorized to visit her. I suggest you leave before I call the police. Defeated, Ryan went home. Julia was there, also in a panic. What if she sues us for emotional distress, things like that? She will sue Julia and we will lose. On Friday, they signed the agreement. They accepted termination for cause, publicly admitted to the irregularities, and committed to repaying the funds in installments. The memo was sent to the entire company, and within hours, it was the gossip in every department. But the worst part was yet to come. Emily gave birth to a healthy baby girl in the early hours of Friday morning. Despite the scare, the delivery went well, and mother and baby were kept for observation for 2 more days. Anthony never left his daughter's side, holding her hand, wiping the sweat from her brow, whispering words of encouragement. When Emily finally held her daughter in her arms, she cried, not from sadness but from a mix of exhaustion and joy. She's perfect, Dad. Just like her mother, Anthony said, smiling. I'm going to name her Claire. Claire Miller. A beautiful name. In the following days, Emily was surrounded by care. Anthony hired a private nurse to help with the initial care, renovated an entire room in his apartment to be the baby's nursery, and even hired a moving company to get the rest of Emily's things from the house she had shared with Ryan. When the movers arrived, they found Ryan sitting in the living room, looking downcast. You can take all of it. I don't want anything in this house that reminds me of her, he said, his voice lifeless. Julia had left town. She found a temporary job in another state and fled before the situation could get any worse. Ryan was left alone, facing the consequences of his choices. A week after the birth, Anthony returned to the company for a meeting with the entire board. He announced a new ethics and conduct policy, with strict guidelines on harassment, favoritism, and the use of corporate resources. He also announced the creation of a support program for employees and their families in vulnerable situations, with psychological, legal, and financial assistance. Miller Construction was founded on the values of respect and integrity, and we will return to having those values as the pillars of our culture, he declared. The changes were well received. Employees who had previously been afraid to report irregularities now felt protected. The company even won awards for social responsibility in the following months. Emily, for her part, went back to school. She had paused her architecture degree when she got pregnant, but Anthony encouraged her to resume it. "You have a talent, Emily. Don't let anyone make you forget that." With the help of her father and a support network that included a therapist, a pediatrician, and even a lactation consultant, Emily began to rebuild herself. She created a routine, started smiling again, and made new friends at college. Claire grew strong and healthy, a chubby baby with rosy cheeks and curious eyes. Anthony became the doting grandfather Emily never imagined he would be, always holding his granddaughter, singing silly songs and making funny faces to get her to laugh. One day, 3 months after everything, Emily ran into Ryan on the street. He looked different, thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled. He looked like he had aged 10 years. "Emily, please, I need to talk to you." She stopped, more out of curiosity than any real desire to talk. "What is it?" "I wanted to apologize, for real. What I did was horrible, unforgivable. I ruined everything, lost everything, and it was my fault." Emily looked at him without pity and without anger, just exhaustion. "Ryan, I have nothing to say to you. You made choices, and choices have consequences. You learned that the hard way. I know. But I wanted to meet Claire, to be a real father. Being a father isn't about wanting, Ryan, it's about being there. It's about protecting, it's about loving unconditionally. You did none of that. So no, you're not going to meet Claire, at least not now. When she's older, if she wants to find you, that will be her choice, but I'm not going to make it easy for you." Ryan hung his head, defeated. "I understand." Emily walked on without looking back. That chapter of her life was over, and a new one was just beginning. Months passed. Emily graduated with her architecture degree and started working at Miller Construction in the residential projects department. She discovered she had a talent for creating welcoming spaces, homes that felt like hugs made of brick and mortar. Claire turned one surrounded by love. The party was small, just family and close friends, but it was perfect. Anthony gave an emotional speech, thankful for a second chance to be a father, this time the right way. "Emily, when you were born, I didn't know how to be the father you deserved, but life gave me a second chance with Claire, and I promise I'm going to do it differently. You two are my family, and you always protect family." Emily hugged her father, crying, "You're already doing it differently, Dad. So much differently." Ryan never showed up again. Rumors said he had left Chicago, trying to start over in another city. Julia, Emily heard, had gotten married and was living abroad. The past was left behind where it belonged. Emily's story became an example within the company. Employees talked about how she had overcome a terrible situation and emerged stronger. Some even came to her for advice, and she always said the same thing. "Never let anyone treat you like you're worthless, because you're not. Everyone has value. And when someone tries to take that away from you, remember, there are people who will support you, who will fight for you. Sometimes it's family, sometimes it's friends, sometimes it's even an absent father who decides to show up at just the right time. But you are never truly alone." The moral of Emily's story was clear. Justice doesn't always come quickly, nor does it always come in the way we expect. But when it does, it rebuilds not only the one who was hurt, but also everyone around them. Humiliating someone in a vulnerable position isn't a sign of strength, it's a sign of weakness. And true strength lies in protecting, in comforting, in lifting up those who have fallen. Anthony learned that it's never too late to be a father. Emily learned that she was stronger than she ever imagined, and Claire grew up in a home full of love, never knowing that her simple existence had been the turning point in a story of reconstruction and redemption. So, what did you think of this story? Emily faced the most difficult storm of her life, but she didn't face it alone. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button to support the channel. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next stories that will make you think, feel, and maybe see life a little differently. And don't forget to comment below about the moment that moved you the most, because I love hearing your thoughts. Until the next story, and remember, you always reap what you sow. Always.